Hey guys, it's Miss Glover, being all technologically advanced and stuff. Today we're going to be talking about animal behavior, but I just wanted to remind you of a couple things. First, tomorrow is your test. That's Friday. You also need to have that protist sheet done that Miss Smith gave you. You should have labeled the 3 protists and drawn them. So make sure you do that. I will also take it up to make sure it's done. Second of all, we're going to be talking about animal behavior today. This is going to be this is going to be tested pretty heavily tomorrow for you. So I want you to make sure that you take really, really good notes and that you really pay attention today. Some of these you already know, but I just wanted to go through them. They're actually pretty cool. Okay, so you should be at the top of your notes. This is Animal Behavior Guided Notes. This is right after Animal Development. So make sure you are there. If not, everybody needs to get situated. Just pause the video and then we'll get started. Okay, so what is behavior? Well, a behavior is anything an organism does in response to a stimulus. So what is a stimulus? A stimulus is an event or thing that causes a reaction. Okay, so think for just a second with your partner about some stimuli that would cause a response in plants. So what would be some things that plants would respond to? So take a second, pause the video, and think of things with your partner, and then tell Miss Smith about them. Miss Smith, these are some things that the plants would respond to. Okay. Welcome back. All right, so some things that plants would respond to. That would be sunlight, that would be water, soil, nutrients. Okay, so if you said any of those, yes, those are stimuli. Those are events or things that cause a reaction in plants. So we're going to be looking at what things are that cause a response in animals, and that's a behavior. Okay, now we have 2 types of behaviors. Number 1 is innate, and you know what innate means. It's something you are born with or you are genetically programmed to do. So that's number 1 on your sheet. Number 2 is a learned behavior, and obviously if something is learned, it's something you were taught or something you've gained through through experiences that you've had in your life. Okay, so the first one we're going to be talking about is innate behaviors, and that's going to be a lot of the ones we discussed today. And then we're going to talk about learned behaviors. Okay, so an innate behavior, again, you're genetically programmed to do it. So the first one that we're going to talk about is a reflex. You have reflexes. You know what a reflex is. If something's coming for your eye like water, you're going to close it. Okay, if someone gets too close to your eye with their finger, you are going to close it. That is a reflex. A reflex means it's simple, it's automatic, and it involves no conscious control. You just do it. Okay, so let's say you're in your kitchen, your mom's cooking, and your hand gets too close to the stove and you touch a burner. What do? You automatically take your hand off. Okay, there is no conscious control. It just happens. The burner's too hot. Your body's going to sense it and you're going to take your hand off. Okay, well, if you're at the doctor too, he takes his little hammer with the stone inside. He taps your knee, and what does your knee do? Well, it should jerk. Okay, and there's no conscious control over it. It just happens. If you want to try that with your partner today, feel free to do that. Not really hard, whatever you want to do. Okay, but those are your reflexes. Now, reflexes can be very, very beneficial in what we call the fight or flight response. And the fight or flight response is when something is terrifying for you or it causes you anxiety. Your adrenaline is going to start pumping. Adrenaline's a hormone. You know what adrenaline is. Get your heart racing, so your adrenaline's going to kick in and you're either going to fight whatever's coming at you or you're going to flee. Now, me personally, I would probably flee. If someone says go hard or go home, I'm usually the person to go home, but you might be the person to fight. I don't know. But if something's terrifying to you, you're either going to fight or you're going to flee. And this is all controlled by hormones, epinephrine, adrenaline, things like that. And then when the thing that's causing you anxiety or is terrifying you goes away, you're just going to come back down to normal. But anyway, that's also a reflex. Okay, so a reflex, it's just something you do. It's automatic. All right. Next one is what we call an instinct. And an instinct actually takes more time and more thought than a reflex. Okay, it's still something that is innate. You're genetically programmed to do it, but it's going to take more time and more thought. Okay, so a good example is right here. We see these little baby cute little pigs suckling milk from their mothers, and it's instinctive of them to do this. It's instinctive of them to suckle to draw out the milk. That's like moving their lips back and forth in order to draw out the milk. You did this when you were a baby with your mother or with a bottle. Okay? So, that's an example of an instinct. Also, think about little baby sea turtles. Whenever they are born, they are going to head for the ocean, and that is instinctive of them to do that. But it does take a lot more thought than something like a reflex where you just do it involuntarily. Okay? Next is courtship. And a courtship behavior, think about courting back in the old days. Courting is kind of like dating someone, attracting them, wowing them, but it was probably a little bit more endearing than it is now. But a courtship behavior is when male and female partners they do little dances or sing little songs, things like that, in order to attract a mate so that they can reproduce. The goal is to get the mate and reproduce. All right, so they'll do these behaviors. Some will do little dances, like I said. Birds will sing songs. You can have some displays of beauty. Remember the male peacock? He will expand his feathers. And the peacock with the more beautiful feathers is going to be the one that attracts the mate and ultimately gets to reproduce with the female and carry on the species. So just like dating today, courtship is essentially to get the mate and to reproduce. Okay, so that's a courtship behavior. It's also innate. It's something that animals are genetically programmed to do, especially for songbirds who sing. Number 4, territoriality. Okay, if you are territorial over something, you are defending your space. Think of a dog. It marks its territory. It usually pees on something. Look, usually a dog will pee like on a fire hydrant. You've seen that. Okay, so you're marking your territory. But territory is defending a physical space, and it's meant to reduce conflict and competition by marking off habitats and other resources. Okay, so if you think about it, I think when I think of territoriality, for humans, think about when you were like in kindergarten and you are sitting somewhere and you put your hand over the seat that's next to you so that your BFF can sit there with you. You are defending your space, your territory. Okay? Same thing like if you go to like a concert or the movies and your friend has to go to the bathroom, you put your jacket over the space beside you. You are marking your territory. Nobody can come in. This reduces conflicts and competition with people around you. All right, this can be the same for lions and things like animals like that. Okay, they're going to defend spaces. They can defend it for food, resources, mating, things like that. And one way that organisms do that is through pheromones. Okay, I think they mentioned pheromones in Shrek. What Donkey does, maybe. But pheromones are chemicals that some organisms emit in order to mark their territory. Okay, I actually believe that ants do this so they can follow each other. But pheromones are just scents that organisms produce in order to leave chemical signals to mark their territory. All right, in order to defend your territory, sometimes you have to be aggressive. You have to use aggressive behavior. If you're being aggressive with someone, you're being confrontational, you're about to fight them. Okay? So this is a means by which you defend your territory. Okay? It's pretty self-explanatory. You're pretty much fighting in order to protect your food, your water, your resources, your young. Okay, so that's just a means in order to be able to defend your territory, your offspring, and that's using aggression. Wait, I do want to mention one thing with aggression. So, and a good example of an aggressive aggression or aggressive behavior are sea anemones. And anemones, like you learned in Finding Nemo, they're actually aggressive. They lash out at each other using their tentacles that have stinging cells on them. And they hurt each other in order to defend their space. So that's an example of aggression that you can put down would be sea anemones. They lash out on one another. All right. So please flip the page. We are going to talk about a dominance hierarchy. All right, so dominance and hierarchy. Someone is dominant. Someone is the top. They are the best. They are the one. They are the queen bee. Okay, a hierarchy just means it's a social ranking. So basically, this is a social ranking between individuals. Okay, so the actual the actual forming of a hierarchy is innate. Okay, that's just something that some organisms and species just do. They form these hierarchies, but where you stand in your hierarchy, in your ranking, is actually learned. And if you look at baboons have a very interesting dominance hierarchy. So they form this hierarchy. Somebody's always at the top, people are below each other, but where you stand and where your position is something that you learn. Okay, so if you're talking about baboons, their ranking is actually based, if they're a female, on their mom. So if their mom is really high ranked in their little group, then the daughter, the female, will also be high ranked. But for males, if you're bigger than the baboon below you or next to you, you are automatically dominant. Okay, so for males it just depends on your size, but for females it really depends on your mom and her ranking in your group. Okay, so then the way that you are treated is going to depend on that ranking. So that's dominance hierarchy. Next is your circadian rhythm, and I promise yours is different than mine. So a circadian rhythm is pretty much your internal clock, your alarm clock. Okay, it's based on a 24-hour cycle. So what time you get up, what time you go to bed, what time you eat, things like that. So for me, my circadian rhythm, I like to go to bed by 10:30, and unfortunately I have to wake up at 5 a.m. in order to get to school. On weekends, I also get up early, usually at like 8 o'clock. But usually you have this internal alarm clock that wakes you up. Yours might be 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. and then on the weekends it will be 2 a.m. to 1 p.m. I don't know, but it's a circadian rhythm, a circle. Okay, think of a circle. It is your alarm clock. So first you start here at midnight, then you have 12 noon, and then you circle back around. Okay, but it is an internal alarm clock that wakes you up or makes you sleepy. Okay, so that's a circadian rhythm, and that is innate. That is what we have, and it can be changed. Think about if you go like overseas or you experience jet lag, things like that. This is going to change your internal clock. If I went and lived in China for 4 months, they're on a different time zone than us. They're 12 hours different. My circadian rhythm would change. I would eventually 12 midnight would feel like 12 p.m. So that's your circadian rhythm. It's just your internal clock. Okay. Next is migration. All right, you know what migration is. It occurs seasonally or yearly, and it's basically migration. It's movement based on season, based on time of year, and you know birds fly south for the winter. So birds that are in northern regions, when it gets really cold up there, they're going to fly south so they can get more bugs. There's more vegetation. It's warmer, and then when it gets warmer up north, they will fly back. So birds migrate. That is a innate thing that they do. Okay. And they learn to navigate based on geographical cues. So different geographics. Here's a little graph of some routes that they take. All right, but that's migration, and that's an innate behavior that they have. They know to go south for the winter. All right, so that will be a good example for you to put on your sheet. The next one, hibernation, as Sandy Cheek says on SpongeBob. Hibernation, you know what that is? It's when animals reduce their metabolism during very cold temperatures. Okay, so during really cold seasons, some animals like polar bears and rodents, they are going to really slow down their metabolism, stop their movement in order to conserve their body fat. All right. And again, this happens in the really cold months. So hibernation examples would be smaller rodents, some large animals, some species of bears. Not all bears do this, but basically you're reducing your metabolism and your movement in order to conserve your body fat. All right, so things store up for winter. That is really a thing. All right, but you know what hibernation is, but what you might not know is estivation. And estivation is just the opposite. These are when animals are going to reduce their metabolism during very hot temperatures. Okay, so hibernation is when they reduce metabolism during cold temperatures, but some actually do it during really hot temperatures. All right, so a good example, actually, many reptiles will go underground where it's cooler during some really hot, dry seasons. Um, Fish do it, birds do it, and some invertebrates actually do it. So again, it's periods of inactivity due to high heat and really, really dry conditions. It's just the opposite of hibernation. All right, you're going to reduce your metabolism, you're going to reduce your movement in order to conserve things in your body. Probably water also, if you think about hot and dry temperatures. Okay, so that's estivation. An example that you can have on your sheet would be reptiles, fish, birds, things like that. All right, so those are all your innate behaviors. Okay, so you had several of them. You had reflexes. You had, let's see, dominance hierarchy. You had courtship behaviors. You had instincts, territoriality, aggression. You had all these different things, circadian rhythms. Okay, those are all innate. You are all genetically programmed to do that. But animals also have learned behaviors. So these are behaviors that are modified through experience or you are taught to do them. Okay? So, again, learned behaviors often taught through social activity with others or repeated experience with a stimulus. All right, so let's talk about some learned behaviors that animals have. The first one is habituation. And if you look at the very beginning of this word, habit. All right, so something is a habit. And let me just explain this to you. The definition that we have here is not responding to a repeated stimulus. Just think about this. Let's say I'm from a really small town in the western part of the states near Shelby, if you know where that is. But let's say I buy a house right next to RDU, right next to the airport. What is going to keep me up at night all the time? Think about it. Airplanes. The sound of airplanes going and coming in. Okay, well, eventually, I'm going to get so used to those airplanes coming in and out, I'm not going to pay attention to anymore to them. All right, they became a habit. All right, to the point where I don't even notice them. All right, that's habituation. It's not responding to a stimulus that is repeated over and over and over and over again. All right, that's habituation. And that's actually something that's learned because at first we notice it, we respond to it, but then after a while we don't anymore. All right, because it's out of habit that we are exposed to it. Okay, so that is habituation. An example again would be living next to an airport. The next one is called imprinting. I don't know, some of you watched Twilight when you were young, and I think Bella's little girl like imprinted on Jacob. I'm actually going to tell you what that means. Imprinting is forming, our definition is forming a social attachment during a critical period. Basically, it's fixing your attention on the first thing you see. So let's say you have a little baby cute duck. Well, when it's born, the first thing that it sees is its mother, right? Its mother duck. So it's going to follow it. But what if the first thing it sees is actually a human? Okay? It's going to, this is a very critical time. When you are a baby, it's very, very critical for your learning. You are going to fix yourself. You fixate yourself on the first thing you see, and that's what you follow. You imprint on it. Okay? So there was actually a guy who did this. This man right here, he raised little ducks, and the first thing that they saw when they were born was this guy. And what he did was he actually had them, you know how you have the little ducks, they all follow each other in a row. Well, he started walking, they followed him, and he's like, I wonder if they'll go in the water. And so he actually walked into a lake, and they followed him. Okay, so they formed this really strong attachment to them, to the first thing that they saw. And some organisms do this. You see it a lot in birds, but that's called imprinting. It's fixing your attention on the first thing you see and then modeling that behavior. So usually, of course, you see the mother duck and her little babies following, and then here they actually followed the man around, which is the first thing that they saw. Okay, so that is imprinting. Okay, the next two things you got to really pay attention because they are they can be difficult. But the first one's pretty easy. It's called operant conditioning. It's just trial and error. Okay, so if you're learning something through trial and error, and basically it's trial and error learning that results from receiving a reward or a punishment. Okay, so and this can really be related to motivation. So let's say you do something, you get a piece of candy, you're going to be more motivated to do it again. All right. But a good example for you guys would be, let's see. Okay, let's say your mom wants you to do chores. You don't like doing chores, but you do them. So you do your chores, she gives you a piece of candy. So now you expect candy, okay? So you do it again. You do the chores, you get a piece of candy, all right? Or let's say you're learning to ride a bike, okay? So at first, when you're starting to ride a bike, you're gonna like squiggle around, you're gonna be really unbalanced, and then you're gonna fall over. You're probably gonna scrape your knee, okay? But then you're gonna get up and do it again, and the next time you do it, you're gonna be better at it. And the next time you do it, you're going to be better at it. Okay? And each time you get a little better, it makes you feel a lot better. You get a little bit more praise from your parents for being able to ride the bike. That's trial and error learning. That's operant conditioning, where you do something and either you get a punishment or a reward. If you get a reward, you're going to do it again and you're going to do it better. Or if you're punished, you're not going to do it again at all. Okay? But it's through trial and error. That's pretty much it. Okay? Oh, and if it's better, you're gonna do it. If you get a reward for it, you're gonna keep doing it better, hopefully each time. All right. So with trial and error and operant conditioning, you have reinforcements and punishments. Okay. So reinforcements, the little plus sign stands for a positive reinforcement. The little negative symbol stands for a negative reinforcement. So a positive reinforcement will be adding something valuable or desirable. So again, this little boy has a cute little gold star on his forehead. So he gets all of his math questions right, he gets a gold star. He does it again, gets a gold star. That's adding something desirable. Or negative reinforcement will be avoiding something unpleasant. So let's say your teacher says, okay, if you do all your math problems, you don't have to stay in an extra 3 minutes after class. So you're doing something really good again in order to avoid something unpleasant. And then, of course, punishment. Let's say you start screaming and you get put in timeout. Okay? That's adding something unpleasant. Or let's say you start screaming and your mom takes your favorite little doll away. That is removing something. All right, but that's operant conditioning. It's just trial and error, okay, based on getting rewards or punishments. And then finally, you have classical conditioning, and this is actually very cool. Look at this guy. His name's Ivan Pavlov. He looks a little more attractive than the other ones we've seen, okay? And classical conditioning is learning to respond to a stimulus that would not normally produce a response. And I'm going to go ahead and explain that. So it says, number one, we have food and we have a dog. Pavlov had these dogs, and he noticed that every time they saw food, they would start salivating. Okay? So food would make them start producing saliva because they saw it and they were hungry. Well, then, before he gave them the food, he started ringing a bell. So he would ring the bell, then he would present them with food. Okay? And then they would start salivating. Well, they started associating this bell ringing with eating food, and so anytime they would hear a bell ring, they would salivate. Does that make sense? Okay, and so that's actually learning to respond to a stimulus like ringing a bell that the dog would normally not respond to. So usually, if a dog hears a bell ring, it's not going to salivate, but because the bell rang before he was presented with food, when they would just ring the bell, he would start salivating. Okay, so those are learned behaviors. You only have 4 of them. They're not too bad, but I really want you to make sure that you got good notes today, because these will be on your test tomorrow. Good luck. I miss you guys, and I can't wait to see you on Monday.